I'm thinking we'll see maybe 180 this year. That's my internal mindset of where I think Bitcoin will go this year.
It's going to be such a mind warp for people to see these companies just became the new Fortune 500. Is that reality, do you think, in the next couple of years?
I think that's the reality. NVIDIA just became the first company to hit a 4 trillion market cap yesterday.
Yep.
And I think MicroStrategy or Strategy will be the largest company in the US markets in the future. I also think Metaplanet will be the largest company in Japan in the future. I truly believe that. And I think not only will we have what we're seeing now with Bitcoin treasury companies, but I do think ultimately long-term, every company is going to have some Bitcoin on their balance sheet. There's no reason to have your long-term working capital rotting away in fiat and depreciating when you could just hold Bitcoin on your balance sheet.
Welcome back to the Bitcoin Economy Podcast. We have Christina, aka MC_Christina. Jody had found you on Twitter a while back, and you come from a TradFi space, and so we'll definitely focus in on some of the traditional finance, how you came over and got orange pilled, and now looking at some of these Bitcoin treasury companies today. But first and foremost, welcome to the Bitcoin Economy.
Great. Thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
So we had followed you on Twitter because, the first thing I saw you interact with some treasury companies. I saw you were at the Bitwise, Bitcoin for standard corporations event, I think back in April in Manhattan, and Avi was there as well. And so I saw you were on the lineup. I wasn't there and didn't get to see you speak. But then after that, I was like, all right, let me follow this person. She's diving into the Bitcoin treasury world. And now you're rocking a Metaplanet hat. That's something we definitely have to touch on. I saw you talking with British Hodl, doing a bet about Metaplanet. So for our audience, we're excited to always, see conviction. It's compelling, hear the reasons behind it. So we appreciate you joining us today. As Avi said, let's jump in and talk about a little bit about how do you go from traditional finance and Goldman Sachs into Bitcoin?
So I actually came to Bitcoin really through a traditional finance background. When I retired from the business in 2019, I was investing and trading for myself. And I think around 2021, maybe 2022, I was trading a lot of MicroStrategy, just kind of day trading the stock. That was at a point where it was moving, $50, sometimes $100 a day. And my best girlfriend locally, she called me and said, "You're never going to believe it. I just got this job at a company called MicroStrategy." And I said, "Oh my gosh, I literally trade this stock every single day." Well, and I didn't really know anything about them other than that it was super volatile and I could make a lot of money day trading it. So she joined them in marketing, and she's not a finance person. And of course, if you work at MicroStrategy, there's an education requirement where you learn about Bitcoin and you're reading materials and reading the Bitcoin standard. And, they're trying to educate everyone at the company, whether it's marketing or Bitcoin Blockware, about Bitcoin. So she came to me and was asking me a bunch of questions. And so I kind of just dug in to help her break it down.
Yeah.
And as she was learning about Bitcoin, because she was working at MicroStrategy, I was learning about MicroStrategy and therefore learning about Bitcoin. And I just went down the total rabbit hole. And at that point, full on Bitcoin, stopped trading MicroStrategy a little bit and wanted to just kind of own it, bought some leaps. And so, now where we've evolved to today, where we have all of these, new Bitcoin treasury companies, I think it was very easy for me to get into Metaplanet because I already understood Bitcoin. I already understood MicroStrategy. So when Metaplanet was brought to my attention, I didn't even have to think about it. It was just kind of all in. I think I made my first purchase on May 1st around $3 and have scaling into it pretty heavily ever since.
Now you came from Vanguard and Goldman, which Simon was also a Goldman alum there as well.
Yeah.
And we were just talking about this prior to recording now. One thing I always want to bring up is they almost seem too good to be true. You look at the market caps of some of these shell companies and for those that listen to me on Con the Table, my old podcast, we had this whole thing with SPACs. We saw the rise and fall of the SPACs. This time it's, to me, significantly different. It doesn't matter the company necessarily, what the underlying business is, because Bitcoin basically is the business in many cases, right? Now, MicroStrategy did have a business before. Similar Scientific has, a business as well. But Metaplanet, for example, they have a hotel right now, but that's not the reason people are buying Metaplanet. So how are you looking at some of these market caps? Because it is pretty interesting to see a market cap of 30 million and they're up to buy 200,000 Bitcoin by 2017, right? So those are not specifically for Metaplanet, but a lot of these you'll see that are popping up. Do you think we're going to run into a similar SPAC situation where someone's going to mess it up?
Yeah. So no, I don't necessarily think they're all a buy. And for me, I think the first point of validation as to whether or not I'm going to actually own the company is really management. And type of background does the management have? Do they have a clear strategy? Are they able to execute that strategy? And have they proven that? And you definitely get that, obviously, with MicroStrategy and Michael Saylor. And then I think top quality management at Metaplanet as well, with both Simon and Dylan. And so for me, management is one of the bigger, kind of hurdles or boxes for me to check before I'm willing to actually invest and not trade any of these BTC/TC companies.
What would you say is your trading philosophy? If you were someone that was trading volatility, Jeff Park is a huge, always talking about, and I think educating the masses in the community about like, hey, this is all about volatility. He just retweeted, I think, a live stream we did with Jeff back in November about how Saylor is basically harnessing volatility. And that's like what's drawing people in. And then since then, he's launched, Strike and Strife and Stride. And it's giving people in the bond market, fixed income market, access to volatility that wasn't there before. You're someone that, you were like, hey, I'm going to quit my job and go trade a volatile stock. I don't even know what it is until your friend started working there. Like, tell us about that whole experience, like your trading strategy.
So it's really, it's an investing strategy and a trading strategy. And I can say that it's evolved and continues to evolve. When I first left the business, I had a very diversified portfolio. I owned a lot of different stocks across a lot of different sectors, typically high quality growth. I've never really been a value investor. And over the years, my portfolio has gotten much more concentrated. And I try to take much bigger positions in stocks that I have the most conviction in. So that's really how I invest. And then I have capital that I trade, and I can take a trade for a day or a couple of days. I usually don't take a trade for longer than a week. And a lot of that is based on the technical setup, the chart, the liquidity, potential catalysts. It's just really trading.
Mm-hmm. I'd love to get back to this bet. So I just pulled it up. I was trying to find it on Twitter here. So it looks like it's $1,000 bet by the end of Q1 2026 that Metaplanet will be the number 2 holder. British Hodl has said that people are being delusional about this with Jack Mallers, Cantor, and Tether have not started buying, and either is Nakamoto, he wrote. So are you still feeling pretty confident in this bet? And what was your thesis on that?
Yeah, so I am feeling confident in the bet. I think they will be the number 2 holder of Bitcoin. And basically, I was introduced to some people in Vegas at Bitcoin Vegas. And post the conference, they had set up a Telegram chat. And I was in this Telegram chat with a handful of other people, including British. And it seemed that I was kind of one of the loudest advocates for Metaplanet. And British, or Safety, gave me a hard time, or people just always seemed to give me a hard time because I was always talking about Metaplanet. The Telegram is kind of since dismantled, but in this Telegram chat, he's like, well, I'll take your money. Would you bet $1,000 that I bet you that will be the number 2? And I'm like, of course I'll take that bet. And so we kind of made this bet on Telegram, and I thought that's where it was going to kind of stay. And then all of a sudden, I see that he posted on X that some Bitcoiner bet him that Metaplanet would be the number 2 and that I was delusional or whatever. And I was like, well, I'll definitely attach my name to this. I'm not shy about it. I do think they're going to be the number 2 holder. And all right, game on.
I guess just to piggyback on that, what What was the conviction for me hearing about like the dichotomy of like taxes, right? In Japan, where it's like 55% if you're selling Bitcoin direct, where this is a proxy to buy it for long-term capital gains. I was like, okay, that's a huge discrepancy there, that all the money from Japan that's interested in Bitcoin should go to Metaplanet.
There's definitely like a cultural kind of movement behind it. And you're absolutely right. Like Metaplanet is kind of the single best way to get Bitcoin exposure if you are in Japan. It's the most tax efficient way. At this point, there's no Bitcoin ETFs, there's no Coinbase, there's no other equities to give you Bitcoin exposure other than Metaplanet. So a big component of it. And then, of course, I believe in the management. I believe in their strategy. I think they're able to do some unique things that U.S. companies aren't necessarily as able to do legally. So they have a put writing strategy, which helps them raise money to buy Bitcoin, which is unique to their strategy. And the growth that they've been able to put up, I mean, it's just like clean exponential growth. Here we are, we have a company that's been doing this a little over a year, and they're already at 15,555 Bitcoin. Expectation, the numbers that I'm hearing being kind of tossed around for their next announcement, which could come likely on Monday, is 18,888. And the rate at which they're growing, I think, can absolutely put them in the number 2 position by the time of our bet. Now, I did say, and it doesn't take away, I said, the one wild card is probably 21 Capital or 21 shares with Jack Mallers, just because they are starting with a very large number and they haven't been able to do anything yet because the merger hasn't completed. But they have 2 very strong partners in Tether and SoftBank. And so I just don't know what's going to happen once that merger completes. But at the same time, I think Metaplanet definitely has a good shot.
Yeah. And as a hedge, if Metaplanet ends up as a third holder and you're,
your
$1,000 probably doesn't matter. Yeah. So on the side of, you're looking at, say, these different geographies, as you just outlined, Japanese markets, ripe for it, long periods of deflation, huge population that's kind of looking for a high performing asset. And SoftBank used to be, that, hey, is this going to be a hopeful, like, lead the Japanese tech wave? And they really missed on AI. They should have been early in, like, to all these AI companies. They were investing in WeWork and things that they shouldn't have been. What other jurisdictions do you see ripe for that? I think I saw you posting on, Smarter Web Company. We had Andrew Webley on. Like, what else is attractive?
I think there are markets that haven't been announced yet that will be very attractive. I think a real contender in Korea would be very interesting. I know that the company that has announced a Bitcoin treasury strategy there, but you can't buy it as a U.S. investor. And so I think Korea makes a lot of sense once it's available for U.S. investors. I also think potentially India could be very interesting. But again, the one that I'm aware of there, you're not able to buy it as a U.S. investor.
Jet King, yeah.
Yeah. So those are kind of 2 markets that I have my eye on a bit.
Do you think we'll ever end up in a world where, these ETFs came into TradFi, started waking people up? Now we got the Bitcoin treasury companies. Now, some of these companies, though, do you think that they see Bitcoin directly as a position that they can, because it feels like they're sleeping on a huge amount of money that they could be making in transactions, but I don't know the legal ramifications there.
Can buy Bitcoin at Fidelity now outside of an ETF. You can open up a cryptocurrency account and buy Bitcoin, and I don't know what all they allow you to buy, but they do allow you to buy Bitcoin. But interestingly enough, Vanguard does not let you buy anything. They don't let you buy a Bitcoin ETF. They don't let you buy Bitcoin. We were visiting my future father-in-law in Florida, and we had him, call Vanguard. And he couldn't buy IBIT. He couldn't buy MicroStrategy. Like, they literally don't let you buy Bitcoin equities.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Well, the question I have that's, kind of similar is, how do you sleep when you have in Japanese stock market or Tokyo Stock Exchange, you're looking at 3350, which is the designation code for Metaplanet. Then it trades also in Germany, and then it also trades in the US.
Yes.
how do you like, what are you looking at? What are up on your three screens? What tools are you using to like compare some of these acquisitions and the MNAVs and all of this?
So one of the great things about Metaplanet, and I would say even Smarter Web, is kind of following in their footsteps. They have really great online communities, both on X and specifically for Metaplanet. They have a great Discord. And so every night, or almost every night, one of the guys in the Discord by the name of Jake, he shares a live kind of like Tokyo trading screen where you can see like the pre-market activity, the volume, and then the actual activity in the auction and when the Tokyo Stock Exchange opens. So it's all been a very fascinating learning experience, having invested in Japan before. And so I would say in the months of May and most of June, I really wasn't sleeping. Because, the Japanese PTS system, which is like the pre-market, starts trading around 7:20 p.m. And then the Tokyo auction starts around 8 p.m. and then trades throughout the night. And then Germany and the US, there's literally only 4 hours a day that Metaplanet doesn't trade. And not that I was trading it, I was buying and accumulating a pretty large position, but I was just so fascinated to learn about the different markets, speak to Japanese investors. And so now that I have my kind of core position, I check in every night just to say like hi to people or good morning, but I'm not focused on monitoring it at all hours of the day.
Yeah.
Do you foresee, I was just looking on Twitter too, Simon had a post about like the Bitcoin 100. Pretty crazy. You need 22 Bitcoin basically to be.
Only 22 Bitcoin to be in the Bitcoin 100 right now. I'm having such a hard time wrapping around my head around that because it's such a low number.
Yeah.
To think that if you need 23 Bitcoin, you would be in the top 100 public companies that own Bitcoin.
So are we going to see like, and I believe this, but like, it almost seems like, when something seems so obvious, it's like, what am I missing? Right. So all these Bitcoin companies, if Bitcoin gets to 1 million, these predictions of Sailor's got 13 million.
Be more bullish.
So when it gets to 1 million or 13 million, like Sailor says,
all
of these Bitcoin companies are going to become.
We revised it recently.
Oh, really?
His new target.
Okay. So even that, right? Like even 1 million, let's say, these companies are going to be the new Fortune 500. Like all these companies are just, it's going to be such a mind warp for people to see these companies just became the new Fortune 500. Is that like reality, do you think, in the next couple of years?
I think that's the reality. I think, NVIDIA just became the first company to hit a 4 trillion market cap yesterday.
Yep.
And I think MicroStrategy or Strategy will be the largest company in the US markets in the future. I also think Metaplanet will be the largest company in Japan in the future. I truly believe that. And I think not only will we have what we're seeing now with Bitcoin treasury companies, but I do think ultimately long-term, every company is going to have some Bitcoin on their balance sheet. Like there's no reason to have your long-term working capital rotting away in fiat and depreciating when you could just hold Bitcoin on your balance sheet. Bitwise put out a great kind of one-page summary yesterday. And they said, 125 public companies own Bitcoin, and it was a 58% increase or change quarter over quarter. We actually had 46 new companies buy Bitcoin just this last quarter. So I think it's, a trend. It's a mega trend that's only going to continue because it's backed by Bitcoin. And
it's the engine that keeps the best employees.
Speaking of which, just broke through all-time highs. So thank you for bringing the great energy, Christina. I think 112.
Oh, Green just did again. Yeah. New high yesterday, and okay, great.
Yeah, 112, 700 or 755. I think it might have tapped 112, 800.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Just beginning. I'm kind of thinking we'll see maybe 180 this year. That's my internal mindset of where I think Bitcoin will go this year.
Is your focus now on, specifically these treasury companies, or have you, obviously you're spending a lot of time on the treasury companies, but after you've established a core position in Metaplanet, are you looking for more, or you saying, hey, that bucket is getting filled. I'd rather, play the options market to have a little more flexibility, or I'd rather, look at, building my core, self-custody stack. Like what's kind of been your mindset locally?
Yeah. So I do have a lot of Bitcoin exposure, whether it's, through outright Bitcoin. I do own MicroStrategy and I own MicroStrategy Leaps. I have a core position now. My largest holding is Metaplanet. I did recently kind of take a position in the Smarter Web, but I ended up trading out of it yesterday just because the stock had performed so well so quickly. And I was looking at kind of like how high MNAV was and what my return was in such a short amount of time. And the position wasn't large enough for me to not try to be more strategic and nimble about it. So I did end up selling that one, but I do intend to buy it back. Hopefully I'm not buying it back at a higher price. And then I also figured out that H100, I was able to establish a small position in it, USOTC, when it first came out, ticker HOGPF. But then Fidelity and other exchanges kind of stopped allowing you to buy it. And so the has just kind of been sitting in my account. But yesterday called Fidelity and realized that you can actually buy H100 on the Nordic growth market. And so put in an overnight order to buy that in Swedish krona, and then they can with US dollar for you. It's kind of a pain, but it's worth it. You don't get a lot of visibility because you literally have to give them a limit order when the market's not even open, and base it off of where you think it might open based on where it closed, based on where Bitcoin is. So I just gave him kind of like a limit above the ask, hoping it would get filled, and it did. And so H100 is one that I've been adding to just last night and then again this morning.
Yeah, fascinating. And I think that's helpful for our listeners. Like, there is friction there, but I think like in a lot of things, if you're patient and you go through the friction, there's like rewards for that.
Yeah, because the CEO, has publicly said he is working on getting the US OTC issue resolved. And so for me, I would rather buy it now,
get ahead of
and then get ahead of all the lazy people who aren't really willing to make the call. And then when you can buy it online again, the demand liquidity will come in.
Yeah, smart.
What would you say, like hot take with Metaplanet being number 2? It also is not intended to be like my number 1 position, but just it's flown, I'd say, in the past, like, I think I'm up like 150%, 200% or something like now. So what's your like hottest take, or maybe a take that, is unconventional from, the rest of Bitcoiners that you may have? And maybe that comes from your time in TradFi in different light, but just curious if you have a hot take there.
Specifically, or
no, in general, just about Bitcoin or treasury companies in general. Putting you on the spot here, so if you don't have
that isn't like conventional. I think for a lot of people, I think we're all in the Bitcoin community a little bit at fault for it, but we can make Bitcoin seem too complex and too scary, right? And, if you launch in with saying that you have to own Bitcoin outright and you have to set up your cold storage and you need a 1-seed password, and you got to make sure that, like, if you're a single parent, that, if something happens to you, you got to give it to your kids. Like, you can make it seem so overwhelming that it's kind of a turnoff for the average person. And so for me, with my family, I try to just really simplify things and on the basics. I mean, the supply demand is the easiest thing to explain. Only 21 million coins. There will only ever be 21 million coins. And just think about it. If every millionaire wanted to own one Bitcoin, there's not enough to go around. And now you have companies buying it and governments buying it, individuals buying it. And so people can very easily wrap their head around the supply and demand. And then once you start talking about the performance of Bitcoin versus other assets, or the market cap of Bitcoin versus other tangible assets, it's very easy to make a strong investment case for it. The biggest pushback I usually hear, what are you supposed to, like, go shopping? And, how are you supposed to use it to pay for stuff? And, people have all these like preconceived notions that they have to use it as currency, or that you have to buy one whole Bitcoin. They don't even realize that you can buy fractional shares. And I think just simplifying the sell is what all of us Bitcoiners can do to help with broader adoption.
Yeah. Well, and
Yeah.
now with
On the simplification
tomorrow,
side of it, I think you have like, yeah, people are just realistically not going to, learn all that stuff beginning, but it's a Trojan horse to learn about self-custody, freedom money, not having the government confiscate. And then to your other point earlier, as you talk about the largest companies in these markets, that's a lot of what we want to focus on with this podcast. And we've really tried to hone in on is strategy becomes the biggest company in the world. Metaplanet becomes the biggest company in Japan. Then you're going to have all these financial products that are likely going to stem from it. And that's something that, Simon has talked about of like, hey, here's these financial services that Metaplanet can be like the true SoftBank, entity that, offers all of these different things. And then we wanted to dive into that to make sure people understand, hey, what are you getting into? What are you loaning against? Or what are you borrowing against? Using Bitcoin as collateral is like very pristine collateral. So it's a big space that's going to grow.
Absolutely agree. And I think, Metaplanet being able to offer preferreds in Japan is going to be a game changer.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is a very yield-starved market with a lot of conservative investors with trillions of dollars sitting in savings accounts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and they're very open. And I think it was so cool. We were at the Strategy World and seeing all the, Saylor invite his quote competition up to come speak. And it's like, we're not in competition. We're all in this together when they buy more strategy benefits too, since they're in such a big lead. And what was cool is Stripe and Stride and all these different products that they're building out to capture someone that is more interested in debt, in this bigger market, beyond just the equity market. So curious, last question here for me, at least on MicroStrategy. Have you explored some of the other products at all, or do you kind of stick with the core MSTR, knowing that they'll benefit, with the trickle down from more Bitcoin coming?
Yeah. So, I mean, my biggest position's in MSTR Common. And as I mentioned, I have some leaps. I have been exploring some of the preferred securities and unfortunately wish I bought them closer to par. They have had a very big move recently, but I'm doing a little bit more due diligence on it because my father, who is, an 81-year-old, super conservative Greek patriarch who, unfortunately for him, despite my exposure to the stock market over the past, several decades, I've never really gotten him to be able to buy stocks. He's, a municipal bond guy, a CD guy, likes his 5%, his stability. I did get him to buy some IBIT about a year ago.
Nice. Good work.
So, he called me freaking out after he made the purchase because he called Charles Schwab, I think that's his broker, and they read him this, 3-page disclaimer on how risky it is. And, he ended up going ahead with the purchase, but he bought it. But I'm really thinking that STRF would be perfect security for him. So if I'm able to convince him to buy a second security, it's going to be Strife, and we have a meeting scheduled down at the beach at the end of the month where he said I can talk to him about it. So we'll see.
Nice. Yeah, the investment grade bond that and Jeff Walton's been talking a ton about. And
and Dan Hillary's amazing on all of these securities. He's definitely,
we're speaking with him in 5 minutes. So
okay,
yeah. We'll tell him.
Definitely follow his work on these securities.
Yeah. We'll tell him you said good things about him.
Yeah, great. No, the whole community is great. I mean, I only joined Twitter in November of last year.
Oh, wow. Following then for so quick.
It was so funny because at night I would be on Instagram and TikTok, and my fiance was like, get off these social media platforms, because I was investing and I was trading like in a vacuum without this platform of knowledge. And he's like, you have to get on X. And so at the time, I had just listened to the October 24 MicroStrategy earnings call. And I, again, was talking to my girlfriend and helping her and, telling everyone about MicroStrategy and Bitcoin. And so I decided to make my first post about MicroStrategy back in November. And I remember someone had commented like, how do you only like one follower and one like? And I said, well, it's because this is my first post ever. Kind of went a tiny bit viral. And then I just started meeting people and connecting with people. And, Jeff Park had reached out to me to speak at Bitwise. And I was very hesitant to do it. I actually was like, you know what, let me just like sleep on it overnight. I really don't like public speaking, but I don't want to say no to you. And so I got back to him the next day and said, okay, I'll do it. But I promise you, I did not sleep from the time I said I would do it till I actually showed up and got it out of the way. But it's been great. I think everyone should be on X just to learn.
Right.
The content is phenomenal. Actually climb that ladder is amazing on Metaplanet. Dan Hillary on these preferred, the MSTR True North community. There's just so much great knowledge there.
Yeah. I love it. Well, hopefully we can get you some more followers. It's at MC_KHRISTINA. We'll post it we'll tag you when we publish this. But thanks so much for coming on. It's been awesome.
Great. Nice to meet you guys. Thanks for having me.
Of course.
Yeah, thank you, Christina.
All right. Tell Dan I said hi.
I will.
Well, there.
Okay.